I honestly don't even know why I'm here, putting this out for strangers to read. Maybe it's because I've been holding all this shit in for too long, or maybe it's because no matter how much I try to move on, I can't stop replaying everything in my head. It's like a movie that just won't stop, you know? And it's one of those shitty, twisted plots that I never thought could happen in real life, especially to me. So, where do I even start? I guess I should give some background first. I've been with Alice for almost 10 years, married for 7. We live in a decent suburb outside of Chicago, have a nice house, good neighbors, the whole white picket fence deal. From the outside looking in, people would probably say I have a pretty damn good life. Hell, I used to believe that too. I mean, I've worked my ass off to get where I am, climbed the corporate ladder, made a name for myself, earned respect from my colleagues. We had the kind of life that people envy, or so it seemed. But let's be real, it's always the ones who look the happiest on the outside, right? Deep down, I knew something was off. Call it a gut feeling or whatever, but for months I felt this shift. Alice wasn't the same anymore. She used to be this sweet, caring woman who I thought had my back. But over time, she just became cold, distant. She'd stay late at work more often, claiming some bullshit about new projects and deadlines. I bought it at first. She's always been career-driven, and I respected that. But when she started coming home, barely talking, going straight to bed without even a good night kiss, I should have known then. Intimacy? Forget about it. I can't even remember the last time we had sex before this whole mess started. And I get it, people grow apart. But this was different. It wasn't just the lack of sex. It was the way she looked at me, like I was just some guy she had to tolerate. The woman who used to light up when I walked in the room was now giving me these dead, lifeless eyes like she was wishing she was somewhere else. Hell, with someone else? But I'm not stupid. Okay. I tried talking to her about it, asking if something was wrong, if maybe I did something to piss her off. She'd brush it off, say she was tired or stressed from work, and that it wasn't me. But her words never matched her actions. And that's when I started paying more attention. The late-night texts, the business trips that kept popping up more frequently, and the way she'd guard her phone like it was a national secret. Then one night I'm sitting at my computer, minding my own business, catching up on emails and shit. Out of nowhere, this anonymous email pops into my inbox. No subject line, no explanation, just a damn photo. I opened it, and my heart literally stopped. There she was, my wife, kissing some guy at what looked like a party. At first, I thought, no fucking way. This has to be some kind of prank. Someone screwing with me. But the universe wasn't done kicking me in the balls. A couple of days later, I get another email. This time, it's not just a photo, it's a full-blown video. Watching it, I felt like my soul was being ripped out. It was Alice, no question about it, in some dingy hotel room, half naked with some stranger. I couldn't watch the whole thing. I felt like I was going to throw up, but I'm a logical guy, right? I wanted to be 100% sure before doing something I couldn't take back. So, I decided to hire a private detective. Yeah, maybe that sounds paranoid, but when you see your wife fucking another dude on video, you want to be damn sure there's no misunderstanding. The detective worked fast. Within a week, he was coming back to me with more proof. She was seeing this guy regularly, meeting up with him after work, sometimes even traveling with him to God knows where. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just one guy. This had been going on for months, if not longer. I felt like an idiot. Every late night at the office was just another opportunity for her to spread her legs for someone else. But you know what? As pissed as I was, as much as I wanted to explode, I still wasn't ready for the worst part. The detective dug deeper, and that's when he found out that one of her lovers was someone I would have never expected. My father, John. I mean, how do you even process something like that? My dad, who I looked up to, who was basically my role model growing up, the man who I thought was a devoted husband to my mom, had been screwing my wife behind my back. I'm telling you, it was like the ground beneath me disappeared. I lost trust in both of them in one fell swoop. Alice and John, the two people I trusted most in the world, had gutted me in the worst way imaginable. And of course, this was the same guy who had given me all kinds of advice about loyalty and commitment. Hypocritical piece of shit. But here's the thing, I didn't confront either of them. Not at first. I don't know why, but something inside me told me to hold off. Maybe I wanted to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. Maybe I was just too stunned to react. So, I kept quiet, played dumb. I wanted to know exactly how far they were willing to go. If I was going to do something about it, I wanted to make sure they'd pay for every single lie, every betrayal. So yeah, I started watching them. Not physically, but I paid attention. I noticed the little glances between Alice and my dad at family dinners, the secret smiles when they thought no one was looking. I was done being the clueless husband, the oblivious son. They thought they were so smart, so careful, but I had the evidence. I just had to figure out the perfect way to use it. So, yeah, after I found out about Alice and my father, I thought I was going to lose my mind. Every instinct told me to just confront them both, tear their lives apart like they'd done to mine. But something held me back. Maybe it was that tiny, twisted part of me that wanted to see how far they were willing to go. Or maybe I just wanted to punish them without them even realizing it was coming. I decided to play it cool, if that's what you can even call it. I didn't pack my bags, didn't scream at Alice, didn't even hint that I knew what she'd been up to. Instead, I did the opposite. I went about my routine, pretending like everything was fine, like I was the same old, dependable Max she'd grown comfortable with over the years. But inside, I was rotting, letting the anger ferment into something darker. I started working late. At first, it was an excuse to avoid seeing her face, that face I used to love, but now couldn't look at without feeling like I was going to throw up. I'd stay at the office long past normal hours, taking on extra projects that I didn't give a shit about, just so I didn't have to go home and pretend everything was okay. But then, after a while, I realized there was something satisfying about it. Every late night at work meant one more night Alice was alone, left wondering if I was onto her. I know it sounds petty, but it was like a game. I wanted to see how she'd react if I started pulling away, if I became the one who was too busy, too preoccupied to care about her. And guess what? She noticed. Suddenly, Alice was trying to act like the concerned wife. She'd ask why I wasn't home for dinner, why I wasn't around on weekends. I'd brush her off with bullshit excuses. Oh, I've got a big project, or I'm too tired. Let's talk later. One night, she actually tried to get real with me. I'd just gotten back from another late night at the office. I was exhausted, not from work, but from carrying this heavy fucking secret around. She sat me down on the couch and said, "Max, we need to talk." I could see she was struggling to keep her voice steady, which was almost funny considering she was the one who turned our marriage into a goddamn joke. She started off by saying she was dealing with some personal problems. She said it like it was some vague, unsolvable mystery, like I didn't already know what the hell was going on. I just nodded, kept my face blank, letting her dig her own grave. "I've been feeling disconnected," she said, "like something's missing. Yeah, nostit alice. Maybe it's all the dicks you've been sneaking around with." I didn't press her for details. Why would I? I wanted her to keep talking, to see if she'd actually admit the truth. But of course, she danced around it, like she was hoping I'd play the role of the clueless, supportive husband. I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. I just told her, yeah, I've been busy. Maybe that's what's causing this, whatever it is. I could see the frustration in her eyes, but I didn't care. If she wanted honesty, she should have tried that before screwing around behind my back. And it wasn't just Alice I had to deal with. My father, Christ. John was still trying to play the doting dad, acting like nothing had changed. Every time we were around family or at work, he'd put on that fatherly smile, like he hadn't stabbed me in the back. But I couldn't even look him in the eye. I avoided his calls, kept our conversations short, refused to meet up for our usual drinks after work. Eventually, he noticed. He pulled me aside at the office one day, trying to get me to open up. "Is something wrong, son?" he asked, with that fake concern that made my blood boil. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was a sick, twisted bastard, but I just bit my tongue. "Everything's fine, Dad. Just busy with work." I lied. I saw the hurt in his eyes, but I didn't give a damn. This was just the beginning. Now, I'm not proud of this next part, but I was hurting. And when you're hurting, you do stupid shit to try and fill that void. I started going out, meeting other women. It wasn't like I was looking for some emotional connection. Hell no. I just needed a distraction, something to dull the pain, even if it was just for a night. I'd meet these women at bars, buy them a drink, let them flatter me, and then take them back to my place. The sex was okay, I guess. It was never about passion. It was about control. For a few hours, I could forget about Alice, forget about my father, forget that my entire life was falling apart. But afterward, I just feel empty. These women weren't Alice, and I didn't want them to be, but they also weren't enough to fill whatever was broken inside me. And then, just when I thought Alice was too caught up in her own mess to notice, she finally did. She must have sensed something had shifted between us. One night, after I'd been avoiding her for weeks, she cornered me in the kitchen. She looked at me with those fake-ass tears welling up in her eyes and said, "Max, I have to tell you something." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for the bullshit excuse she was about to spew. And then, for the first time in a long time, she surprised me. She admitted it. She actually said the words, "I've been unfaithful." She didn't beg for forgiveness, didn't cry, didn't try to justify it beyond some weak explanation about how she'd felt neglected and unhappy. Neglected? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You sure it wasn't just that you were horny?" Her face twisted, and for a second I thought she was going to slap me. But she didn't. She just stood there, looking pathetic, like she was expecting me to comfort her or something. I didn't. I turned around and walked out. She had no idea that I already knew everything, that I knew about my dad, the other men, the whole fucking circus she'd been running behind my back. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing how deep she'd cut me. Not yet, because if I was going to burn this thing down, I was going to do it on my terms. I guess you could say that holding everything inside took its toll. I tried to act normal, but each day it felt like I was swallowing shards of glass just to get through the day. Alice, with her fake smiles and bullshit apologies, thinking I was too dumb to notice anything, and my father still trying to play the role of the doting dad. It was sickening. I wasn't about to just let them get away with it. No, if they wanted to ruin my life, I was going to ruin theirs 10 times over. Confronting them one-on-one? That would have been too easy, too private. I wanted them to feel as humiliated as I did, but on a grand scale. So, I started planning. I began gathering everything I had, emails, photos, videos, the whole ugly mess. I even reached out to the detective one last time to dig deeper into Alice's other affairs. If I was going to burn her down, I wanted a mountain of evidence to crush her under. And my father? I wanted him in the crosshairs too. The old man thought he could slink away, apologize, and pretend everything was fine. Screw that. I needed a stage, something big. That's when it hit me. Alice's birthday was coming up. We had this tradition where we'd host a party at our place every year. Friends, family, colleagues, all of them would be there. What better opportunity to expose her for the snake she was? It would be perfect. She'd never see it coming. The night of the party, I acted like everything was normal, all smiles, playing the part of the devoted husband. Alice was glowing, thinking she'd gotten away with everything. Little did she know, I had the entire event rigged to turn into her worst nightmare. I waited until everyone had had a few drinks, loosened up, laughing and joking. That's when I stood up in front of everyone, glass in hand, like I was going to make a toast. I can still remember the look on Alice's face when I started talking. At first, she looked confused, then nervous when she realized I wasn't reciting some sappy speech. "I've always prided myself on being honest," I began. "And I think it's only fair that we're all honest tonight, especially with so many of our close friends and family here." I saw my father's eyes narrow, and Alice? She went pale. I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the TV in the living room, and started playing the video. The one where Alice was getting cozy with her lover in that hotel room. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop, and when the video ended, I just stood there, letting the weight of what I'd just shown sink in. Alice tried to stammer out some excuse, saying it was a mistake and that she'd been going through a tough time. But no one was buying it. Our friends were whispering, faces twisted in disgust. Her colleagues, some of whom had always looked at us as that perfect couple, were shaking their heads. I could see her world collapsing in real time. And then I turned my attention to my father. "John, care to explain why you thought it was a good idea to screw your son's wife?" I asked, staring him down. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, looking like he'd seen a ghost. I told everyone how he'd been sneaking around with Alice, all while playing the role of the supportive father. The betrayal hit everyone like a freight train. The party ended in chaos. People rushed out, uncomfortable whispers filling the air. Alice tried to grab my arm, pleading, but I just shook her off. "We're done," I said. "I'll send you the divorce papers." I didn't need to hear her excuses. I was beyond caring at that point. As for my father, he tried to corner me afterward. He followed me out to the driveway, begging me to listen. "It was a mistake, son. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he kept saying, but his words were just noise. I was done listening to his bullshit. "You lost the right to call me son the moment you decided to screw my wife," I spat back at him. From that moment on, he was dead to me. I cut him out of my life completely. Our business partnership? Gone. Family dinners? Forget it. I made sure everyone knew exactly what he'd done. He tried to salvage what he could, but it was too late. His reputation was in tatters, just like mine had been. I didn't get any satisfaction out of it, though. I thought I would. I thought that by exposing them, I'd feel some kind of relief, maybe even joy. But all I felt was empty, like I just burned down my entire life and was now standing in the ashes. But at least they were burning with me. So, after that whole mess with the party, you'd think I'd be done, right? I mean, I'd already nuked my wife's reputation and my father's life in front of everyone we knew. But the thing is, once you start down that path, it's hard to stop. It's like a drug, the rush of seeing them squirm, trying to piece their lives back together. And I wasn't ready to let them have even a shred of peace. I decided it was time to take my revenge to the next level. I started creating fake social media accounts. Yeah, I know it's petty, but I didn't care. Posing as my father, I began posting cryptic, suggestive messages aimed at Alice. Things like "I miss our nights together," and "you know you can't resist me." It was subtle enough to avoid getting flagged, but juicy enough to set off rumors. And boy, did it work. Alice's phone started blowing up with texts from her friends and coworkers, all trying to get the inside scoop. She tried to deny it, of course, claiming it was some troll trying to mess with her. But the damage was already done. People are quick to believe the worst, especially when the person in question already has a reputation for being a cheater. The whispers started at her office, and soon enough, she was getting side eyes and cold shoulders. I knew I was screwing with her sanity, and that's exactly what I wanted. Every time she tried to post something to clear her name, I'd drop another message or a fake screenshot, making it look like she was trying to cover up even more lies. It was glorious watching her life unravel, one post at a time. But I wasn't done with my father either. One day, I told him we needed to meet up. He was desperate to talk, hoping I'd finally let it go, maybe even reconcile. But I had other plans. We met at this crowded restaurant downtown. As soon as he walked in, I could see the relief on his face, like maybe I was finally coming around. The moment he sat down, I laid into him. I didn't bother keeping my voice down either. "So, how was fucking my wife behind my back? Did she feel better than Mom?" Heads started turning, and the place went dead silent. He tried to shush me, whispering that we should take this outside, but I wasn't about to let him off that easy. I went on, spilling every disgusting detail for everyone to hear. "You know what's funny? All those times you gave me advice about being a good husband, about loyalty. Meanwhile, you were screwing my wife." He tried to defend himself, stammering out some bullshit about how it was a mistake and he was going through a hard time. But no one was buying it. The whole restaurant was staring at us, people pulling out their phones, probably filming. It was chaos, and I loved every second of it. I walked out, leaving him there humiliated, knowing he'd never live that down. That was just the beginning, though. I still had his business to target. I knew some of his partners, had met them over the years at various events, and it wasn't hard to start planting seeds of doubt. A few well-timed emails, some anonymous tips about shady dealings. Nothing outright illegal, but just enough to get people talking. I leaked a bit of sensitive info, stuff that could be traced back to him if people dug hard enough. Before long, one of his major deals fell through. I heard through the grapevine that his partners were backing out, not wanting to be associated with someone whose reputation was tanking. He tried to deny it, of course, but the damage was already done. You can't undo the stink of suspicion once it's out there. As for Alice, I wasn't done with her either. I had more dirt to spill. I started sending anonymous letters to her workplace, detailing her affairs, complete with screenshots and dates. I made sure to include some financial discrepancies I'd uncovered while going through her things. She'd been skimming off her partner's funds, using company trips as excuses to meet up with her boyfriends. It didn't take long for her bosses to get wind of it. The office that once treated her like a rising star now treated her like a pariah. She got demoted, lost her team, and I heard she's basically doing grunt work now just to stay employed. But every time I thought about how I'd ruined her, I didn't feel satisfied. I thought I'd feel this rush of triumph, but instead, there was just nothing. I kept trying to fill that void with random women. I'd meet them at bars, chat them up, take them home, but it was all so empty. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I just needed the distraction. It was like scratching an itch that never went away. The women I hooked up with, they eventually caught on. They'd tell me I was distant, cold, like I was only half there. And they weren't wrong. I was still too focused on my revenge to care about anything real. One of them even told me, "You're not over your ex, are you?" I laughed it off, but deep down I knew she was right. I wasn't over any of it. Every night, I'd replay everything in my head, trying to convince myself I was winning, that I was getting the last laugh. But really, I was just sinking further into this pit I'd dug for myself. Alice, John, all of them, I thought I'd feel better seeing them fall apart. But all I felt was this gaping emptiness. It was like staring into an abyss, knowing that no matter how many people I dragged in with me, it wouldn't change a damn thing. But at that point, I was in too deep. I couldn't stop. The only thing I could do was keep going, hoping that somewhere along the way, I'd find something that would finally make me feel alive again. After months of being consumed by rage and revenge, I was exhausted. But I wasn't ready to admit it to myself yet. I just knew that I couldn't keep going like I was. I was burning through women, friends, business connections. Hell, even my own sanity. But then I met Sarah. Sarah wasn't anything like the women I'd been messing around with. She wasn't looking for a quick hookup or a distraction. She was just real. We worked at the same company, and I'd seen her around, but we never really talked until one night after a work event. I stayed late, as usual, just trying to avoid going back to my empty, wrecked apartment. She was there too, nursing a glass of wine, and I figured why not sit down and have a conversation for once. Turns out, she had her own demons. She'd been cheated on too, by her fiancé, right before they were supposed to get married. We ended up talking for hours, swapping horror stories, venting about betrayal, and all the bullshit that comes with it. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. I didn't have to pretend with her. She got it, every twisted thought, every bit of anger. Before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. What started as late-night talks in the office turned into grabbing coffee on weekends, then dinners. There was something about her that felt safe, I guess. She wasn't trying to fix me, but she didn't judge me either. And it was the first time I'd let myself feel something real since everything blew up with Alice. Sarah convinced me to try therapy. I thought it was bullshit at first, like sitting in some stranger's office talking about my problems was going to magically fix anything. But she was persistent, and I agreed to go, mostly to shut her up. And I'll admit, those sessions weren't completely useless. I started to see how all this anger I was holding on to was just poisoning me. I was getting revenge, sure, but it wasn't making me feel better. It was just making me bitter and lonely. Sarah and I started getting close, really close. We even went away for a weekend together, some cozy cabin she'd found. But here's the thing. Even when I was with her, my mind would drift back to Alice and John. Every time she'd reach out to hold my hand, every time she'd look at me with those hopeful eyes, all I could see was the betrayal I'd been through. Sarah noticed. She wasn't stupid. She'd catch me staring off into space or getting that faraway look whenever something reminded me of my past. She tried to be patient, but eventually, she started pushing for answers. "Max, are you really over all of this?" she asked me one night after I'd gone quiet for the millionth time. "Or are you just using me to distract yourself?" I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I was ready to move on, but the truth was I was still stuck. I was still obsessing over Alice, still replaying all the shit she'd done, still wanting to see her pay. And no matter how good Sarah was to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just using her as a crutch to prop myself up while I drowned in my own bitterness. Things came to a head when Sarah and I went on a trip together. I thought it would help, a change of scenery, something to distract me from everything that had happened. But it only made things worse. Every beautiful moment, every quiet sunset by the lake, was tainted by memories of Alice. I kept comparing everything to the life I'd had before, the life that was now ashes. I could tell it was wearing on Sarah. She tried to be patient, but every time I pulled away, I could see the hurt in her eyes. The breaking point came at a restaurant during that trip. We were having dinner, talking about something trivial, when I glanced up, and there he was, one of Alice's former flings, sitting a few tables away, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. I froze, my appetite gone. All I could think about was confronting him, beating the crap out of him right there in front of everyone. But instead, I just sat there, staring at my plate, gripping my fork like it was the only thing keeping me tethered. Sarah noticed immediately. "Max, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice low and concerned. But I couldn't even answer her. My mind was racing, heart pounding, and all I could see was red. That bastard had been one of the reasons my marriage fell apart, and he was just sitting there, happy as can be. I could barely hear Sarah as she kept asking what was going on. That was the moment I knew I was still broken. I realized that even with Sarah, even after everything I'd done to try and move forward, I was still chained to my past. I still wanted revenge. I still wanted Alice and everyone involved to suffer as much as I had. And Sarah? She deserved better than a man who couldn't let go of his own demons. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed some air. Sarah didn't push, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I walked out of that restaurant, not even looking back. I knew, deep down, that I was going to have to make a choice soon. Either let go of the past or lose whatever chance I had left at happiness. But right then, all I could think about was how much I still wanted to hurt the people who destroyed my life. I don't even know where to start with this. After everything that had happened, after all the chaos and destruction, you'd think I'd be tired, ready to throw in the towel. But instead, I found myself planning one last move, one final blow to John and Alice. I couldn't let go. I kept telling myself that I was almost there, that I'd feel better once I burned their lives to the ground completely. That's when I discovered the last betrayal. Turns out, screwing me over wasn't enough for those two. They had been plotting to sell off my property, the one thing I had left that truly meant something to me. They were planning to use the money to fund their own little escape, maybe run away together once everything blew over. I found the emails between them on Alice's old laptop, scheming about how to fake my signature, how to sell it off without me knowing until it was too late. I felt like an idiot. All this time, I thought it was just about the betrayal of trust, the affair, but it went deeper. They were trying to screw me over financially, too, leave me with nothing but the ashes of a life I'd built. That's when I decided, no more games, no more subtle revenge. This was going to be a full-on public reckoning. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, all the photos, videos, the emails detailing their plan to sell my property. It was all going out there. I posted everything on social media, on every platform I could think of. I sent it to journalists, local news outlets, hell, even gossip blogs. If they thought they were going to screw me over and slink away unnoticed, they had another thing coming. The fallout was immediate. My phone blew up with calls, texts, emails from people asking if it was all true. John's business partners started pulling out, cutting ties to avoid the scandal. Alice's workplace? They had no choice but to let her go after the financial fraud I exposed. Watching it all unfold gave me a sick kind of satisfaction. I watched their lives implode from the comfort of my living room, sipping on a drink like I was watching some twisted reality show. But here's the thing, it didn't feel like victory. Sure, I got what I wanted. I dragged their names through the mud, destroyed their reputations, ruined whatever future they thought they could have together. But after all the dust settled, it was just quiet, empty. I was alone, sitting in that same goddamn apartment that I used to share with Alice, surrounded by reminders of everything I'd lost. And then there was Sarah. God, I didn't deserve her. She stuck with me through so much of my madness, trying to pull me out of the pit I was digging for myself. But even she had her limits. When she saw what I'd done, how far I'd gone just to get back at Alice and John, she just shook her head. "You're not over it, Max. You never were," she said quietly one night, her eyes filled with disappointment. "You can't keep living like this, chasing revenge. It's going to kill you." I tried to argue, to convince her that this was closure, that I needed to do this to move on. But she wasn't buying it. She left the next morning, and that was it. I was truly alone now. The revenge that I thought would set me free had only trapped me deeper. I kept thinking about that stupid phrase people say, revenge is a dish best served cold. But no one ever tells you that after you serve it, you're left with nothing but the cold. I thought about reaching out to Sarah, maybe trying to fix things, but I knew it was too late. I had pushed away the one person who actually cared. I was back to square one. Only now, there was no more revenge to distract me. No more targets to destroy. Just me and the mess I'd made of my life. It took me a while to figure it out, but eventually I realized that if I was ever going to get out of this hell, I had to forgive. Not for them. Hell no, they didn't deserve it. But for me, carrying all that anger, all that hate, it was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I had to let it go, even if it killed me to do it. I stopped looking at their social media accounts, stopped asking mutual friends how they were doing. I deleted the old emails, the photos, everything I'd used to fuel my anger. It was like ripping off a bandage that had been stuck for way too long. Painful as hell, but necessary. Forgiving them didn't mean I forgot. I still remember every betrayal, every lie, every sleepless night wondering how they could do that to me. But I had to stop letting it define me. I had to stop letting them live rent-free in my head. Now, I'm trying to live for myself. I'm not saying I'm suddenly healed or anything. I'm still broken in a lot of ways, but at least now, I'm not letting that brokenness control me. I've started going to therapy again. Not for Sarah, not for anyone else, but for me. I'm trying to figure out who I am without all the rage and the bitterness. Maybe one day I'll be able to look back at all of this and not feel that familiar sting. Maybe I won't. But for now, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. Because, as it turns out, the real victory wasn't in tearing them down. It was in finally letting go and trying to rebuild whatever was left of me.